Hey guys, right, so in the last video that I did, I was talking about how I got low compression on some of the cylinders of the bike. So I think that was about, I can't remember, 2 weeks ago or something like that. So over the last 2 weeks, I've not really got around to putting any videos up, but I have been working on the bike. As you can see, I've removed the engine with the intention of fitting a replacement engine, which is here. Okay, so I got this engine from a breaker's yard and I've given it a bit of a clean up. As you can see, it's quite clean, but I thought that before I fitted it in the bike I should probably compression test it, because the guy that I bought it from hadn't compression tested it. It was quite a cheap motor. I only paid 100 quid for it, which is pretty cheap for a, that kind of motor. So over the last few days I've been trying to figure out how to run a motor outside the bike so that I can do the compression test without putting it back in the bike. So basically what I've done is initially trying to do it with jump leads, just like running jump leads straight from the battery to the starter motor, and all I got was a lot of sparks and not a lot of turning over. So what I did was then I went to a Motor Factors this morning and I bought this what do you call it, battery isolator switch. Now unfortunately the battery isolator switch is designed for a car, which meant I had a whole lot of faff because I had to do something to make it fit to the bike battery. So what I did was I got two little bits of steel, cut them to about the right size, and drilled a wee hole at that end and a big hole at that end, and the same with this one, big hole and wee hole. And then what I've done is I bolted it to the battery at that end. I bolted it to the switch on the underside, which you can't really see very well because I've wrapped lots of tape around it to try and make it a bit safer. And then what I've done is I've taken this starter motor lead and I've run that to the positive side of the starter motor, and the negative one goes down here and that's onto there. And what you do is you put that in and you turn it, and it in a second, and it turns the motor over. So if you're ever in a situation where you need to compression test a motor outside a bike or a car, that's basically how you do it. Or one way you can do it. Maybe there are better ways to do it, I don't know, but that's how I've done it. It's basically just a couple of starter motor leads, a battery and a switch, and a couple of bits of metal with holes drilled in to put it all together, to put the switch onto the battery and onto the lead. So I did the compression test on this motor, and it's basically bad news. I basically bought a dud motor to replace my dud motor. Now this motor, the guy told me that had 32,500 miles on it, or thereabouts, which I would have thought is not a high mileage for a modern motorcycle. So I would have expected it to get decent compression pressures. But when I tested it just now on my tester, which is basically one of these, I got 50 psi, give or take, on 1, 2, 3 cylinders, and I got 125 psi on that one. So I'm not quite sure what's going on there, why you would get such different readings, because 125 psi, that's not far short of what it should be on one of these motors. It should be about 138. So it's like 3 cylinders have worn really badly and one's kind of not too bad. So I'm not really sure why that is, but there we go. So then what I thought was, well, because what I realised was, when I'd originally done the compression test on this motor is the one actually from the bike. Okay, when I did the compression test, I realised that the carburetors were still on it. And I don't think I held the throttle open. I can't remember for sure, but I think I forgot to hold the throttle open. And so that's why I would have got like really bad readings. Because when I originally did the compression test, as I said in my previous video, I got about 50 on one of the middle ones and 70 on the other, and I couldn't manage to do these with it in the bike because they're kind of under the chassis and it's awkward to get this thing in. So so I thought I'll give it another compression test just now, seeing as I've got the rig set up. So I swapped the starter motor from that one to that one. And by the way, I should probably also mention, if you're doing this, if anyone else is doing this, you need to have this side on, because if you try and do it with the the alternator cover, you need to have the alternator cover on, because if it's off, what happens is there's a little cogwheel in here, and as the motor turns over, if this is not in place, the cogwheel just basically kind of works its way out and then disengages. So you have to have the alternator cover on the motor to do the test. I just thought I'd mention that. Right, so I thought I might as well test this one while I'm at it. So I hooked it up to here, put the starter motor back in and everything, and span it over and tested each of these, and I got about 100 on that one, and I got about 90 on each of the middle ones. So I must have actually not had the throttle open, because I can't think why I would get like 50 and 70 the first time and then 90 on when I tested it just now. So I think it must have been because the carburetors were still on. I didn't have the throttle open, so it wasn't getting enough air. So that was basically, I'd done the test wrong. And then that one I got about 70, around about 70, 75. So, and it's the compression pressure is meant to be between, according to the Haynes manual, it's meant to be between 210 and 138. That's the kind of range that it has to be in. So if it was 138, it would basically run okay, and if it's below 138, it's not going to run properly. Now, as all four of those are considerably less than 138, even the one that's 100, that's like 38 psi down on what it should be, and if you're talking 90 psi, then that's like 48 psi on what it should do. So basically, this is why the bike's not running. So now I'm basically in a situation where I've got two motors, an original one and a replacement one, and both of them are low compression. So I'm not really sure what to do at this stage. I'm going to end up having to rebuild one of them, I suppose. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. If anyone's got any suggestions, that would be great. Thanks very much for watching. See you later. Bye.